All right, welcome back, Powers on Sports podcast. Now it is time to get into some college football news and notes as we get to about the quarter pole of the college football season. Most teams have played 3 weeks, 3 games. Some have had a bye week already, but a lot of teams have played 3 in their first bye coming up of the 12-game regular season. No better person to talk. We've had coach firings. We've had underachievements. We've had a couple of upsets. No better person to talk all things college football than the West Coast bureau chief. He's no longer quite on the West Coast. He's now in the Rocky Mountain area. Just made a move to Denver, Colorado. But Matt Zemek, who's the editor of USA Today's Trojan Wire, he also covers and reports on UCLA, which had a major coaching shakeup this week with Deshaun Foster getting relieved. Mr. Zemek, welcome back to the podcast, sir.
Always great to be on your show, Jason. Boy, we have a ton to talk about. And, let's just stop. Just one brief comment before we really get rolling. It is such a different college football world compared to 5, 7, 8, 9 years ago. A decade ago, even like 5 or 6 years ago, it was Saban and Dabo, and either Kirby or like 2019 LSU would stick their elbow in, but you knew that it was just 2 or 3 teams competing for the national championship. And now in the 12-team playoff era and with NIL and the portal, it's all up for grabs. There is no clear-cut number one team. I mean, obviously Ohio State established itself as the best team ultimately, but not in the regular season. It was total parity, balance, fluidity, and we have that kind of season again in college football 2025.
No doubt. 3 weeks in, again, let's start where you're at out on the West Coast. UCLA pulls the plug on Deshaun Foster. Brent Pry gets run out of Virginia Tech Blacksburg after a horrendous start, getting crushed by Old Dominion in their own building. Give me a thought or two about Deshaun Foster. This had kind of been lingering and percolating for a couple of weeks now. We all remember the disastrous initial press conference at the Big Ten and all that stuff. Give us a little background on what really took UCLA over the edge here.
Yeah, it's worth going into the background for people who don't follow UCLA closely the way I do. One thing people outside Southern California and the West Coast need to realize is that Deshaun Foster in the summer, he pulled a Nick Saban. He walled off the media from practices. He wanted ultimate secrecy so that his players could, avoid distractions, and he could just drill his guys and get them to win ball games. That was the rationale. When you do something like that, and then you play as horribly as UCLA did coming right out of the gate, you look like a total clown. You look like an amateur. And I wrote, about this, that he wasn't just losing Deshaun Foster. He was in over his head. He was clueless, lost at sea. So it wasn't just losing, but he had no idea how to fix this. And of course, you add the Nico Iamaleava NIL victory in the offseason. This was supposed to be a big upgrade for UCLA. A lot of people, not me, but a lot of people thought this is a 7, maybe even 8-win team. UCLA would be respectable. And of course, so when it goes just so south the way it did, and then of course you lose to New Mexico by 25 at home. Those 3 things. New Mexico, 25 points at home. And it could have been much worse. New Mexico fumbled once inside the 5 and got turned over on downs inside the 10. It could have been a 39-point game. So much like Brent Pry getting blasted at home by Old Dominion, Deshaun Foster got blasted at home by New Mexico. Those are coach killers. When you're on the edge and then those kinds of losses happen, the administration has to cut the cord right away because the embarrassment, the humiliation, the just constant tidal wave of negative publicity. UCLA, obviously the worst team in the Big Ten. I mean, UCLA plays Northwestern in a week. That will basically decide who's in the basement for the Big Ten. But I would favor Northwestern over UCLA right now. So it just reached critical mass right away, and there was no way UCLA could hang on. And UCLA's administration has a reputation, and it's a deserved one, for not taking football seriously, not being very proactive. So it had to be really bad for UCLA to act. And of course, Jason, just before coming on to your Powers on Sports podcast here on Wednesday night, UCLA fired its defensive coordinator.
Wow.
So like this is a bloodbath. It's a bloodbath. There's an understanding at UCLA that we have to just absolutely clean house. And so, Jason, I'm sure you want to know about the coaching search. Here's something just to consider. I'm not making a prediction. I'm just laying out details and reminding people about coach hiring and interview procedures. You can't talk to currently employed coaches.
Right.
So like UCLA would have to wait, 2.5 months for a lot of guys obviously mentioned as being on the market. But there are a couple guys that UCLA can talk to because they're not employed. One being Pat Fitzgerald,
Right.
the recently exonerated ex-Northwestern coach. I'm not predicting that Pat Fitzgerald will go to UCLA. I don't think Pat Fitzgerald would want to take the job at UCLA. But UCLA can talk to him. It can get him in a room. And with Luke Fickell very much on the hot seat at Wisconsin, which would be a natural fit for Fitzgerald. And I think that would be a place Fitzgerald would seriously consider. But like if UCLA wants to make a run at Pat Fitzgerald right now, it can. And moreover, if it did, that would preempt Wisconsin. If you're Wisconsin, you might want to think, maybe we need to fire Luke Fickell now so that we can hire Pat Fitzgerald right away before he comes on the open market. So just things to think about in terms of the coaching carousel and the interview process.
And to me, there's no chance they don't hire a coach with proven winning experience. They're not going to hire a coordinator, I don't believe. They got to hire somebody to compete, again, a little bit with Lincoln Riley, but somebody that's got a name to help amp up some of that NIL, to help amp up some of that excitement. And again, Westwood has different parameters and constraints than they do across town at USC with finances, public school versus private school, commitment to football is not what it is at USC. So there are some constraints, but some names. Again, I heard Gary Danielson mention, would John Gruden be interested in a job like that in LA? Give me a thought. Maybe a guy like a big name, kind of like a John Gruden kind of guy.
Well, just John Gruden is a guy UCLA can talk to.
Right.
He's open for an interview. So like that, it's not so much Gruden himself. It's just that he's unemployed. So he, like Pat Fitzgerald, is someone UCLA, if UCLA wanted to make a run at him, it can do it right now. It doesn't have to wait. That would be really interesting. The other piece of this puzzle, though, Jason, and for everyone watching and listening to this show, is that, in terms of the national picture and how a coaching process goes, in addition to wanting to interview someone right away, there's also the reality that UCLA has to fire athletic director Martin Jarmond. He's the guy who dragged his feet hiring Chip Kelly, or not firing Chip Kelly right after the 2023 season. He dragged his feet, he dithered, and in that period of uncertainty, USC poached Danton Lynn, who was the UCLA defensive coordinator from UCLA, brought him to USC. If Martin Jarmond, the athletic director for UCLA 2 years ago, and he's still there, had immediately fired Chip Kelly, promoted Danton Lynn to head coach, UCLA might be in a much, much better position today. So, like the people in and around UCLA, this is universal. There's no dissent here. It's 100% believed that Martin Jarmond, the AD, needs to be fired. Okay. And they need to put in a new AD to make the hire of the new head coach start fresh, and so that the new AD can interview the set of candidates for this head coaching search. So that's another really important thing to note.
And that would be another name, Danton Lynn, who's got some UCLA ties and all that stuff. So that's another name who could take away from the USC a little bit. You could do a double,
but he wouldn't. But Danton Lynn will not take the UCLA job unless I think Jarmond is fired, because Danton Lynn was there when Jarmond refused to put Danton Lynn as head coach. So like Danton Lynn knows that Martin Jarmond is amateur hour. So that is something for UCLA to consider.
Give me a name or two for Virginia Tech. I know everybody thinks Shane Beamer. I don't think there's a chance in the world Shane Beamer's leaving the finances of the SEC to go to Virginia Tech, who's way behind. I know you South Carolina has struggled and got beat a little bit up last weekend, but that's a great job compared to Virginia Tech. A guy like Michael Vick, with a guy like Pat Fitzgerald, kind of a reclamation project for him, maybe Virginia Tech. Give me a couple names to replace Brent Pry, who, again, seemed like he was over his head, as well as the head coach of Virginia Tech.
Well, with Shane Beamer, just coming to daddy's rescue would be the appealing part of it. Now, I think that he does have it good at South Carolina, and he does have SEC visibility and resources. It would be a downward move if he went to Virginia Tech. So I think it's possible, but I wouldn't say it's likely for Shane Beamer. My name would be John Sumrall, the head coach of Tulane. And let's remember this about John Sumrall. In addition to the fact that he's kept Tulane going well after Willie Fritz left and went to Houston. The other detail is, if Bill Belichick hadn't come into the picture at North Carolina, John Sumrall is probably the guy who would have gotten the Tar Heel job in Chapel Hill in the ACC. So, he's coaching in the South, in New Orleans, talent-rich area. So going to another Southern or mid-Atlantic program, it makes sense geographically. It makes sense in terms of going from Group of 5 to ACC. But, he's not going to a blue blood. He's not going to the very top of the food chain. If you are John Sumrall and you're thinking about how you go up the career ladder, this is a jump that makes sense. You're going to not the biggest ACC program. You're going to a mid-tier program. You build that up, then the big job will be there for you in several years from now. So John Sumrall, to me, would be an excellent hire for Virginia Tech because he's been good all the way through his career. And the fact that Tulane was good last year, looks good this year, and Virginia Tech fans, hey, Tulane just hammered Duke. All right. So you want to beat mid-tier ACC teams and at least, get back to being an 8-4 type of program. John Sumrall, he's offering pretty convincing proof that he can do that. So John Sumrall to me, and I think, whether Virginia Tech snaps him up or some other high major program snaps him up, he's going up the escalator. He is
maybe even a guy in my world at some point. Maybe even a guy like Alex Golish could potentially be in line for that kind of job as well. A guy that's reestablished USF. Go ahead.
I would only say that Golish is beginning to do it at South Florida. Sumrall's kind of already done it a little bit more. You want to see a guy do it multiple seasons, not just one. I mean, if I'm an AD, if I'm an athletic director, I definitely have Sumrall above Golish. Yes. But of course, if Sumrall says no, then Golish is available as my plan B.
No doubt. All right, let's get to some of the on-the-field stuff, some themes. A couple for me, an early theme is kind of have we overrated some of these quarterbacks that we came into the year thinking were going to be great. Arch, Nico out where you're at, UCLA, Lagway at Florida with 5 picks last week at LSU. Even Nussmeier to some degree. I know that he had the big win at Clemson, but they've not gotten it clicking. I know it's only 3 weeks. I get it, but to me that's an early theme is the overvaluing of some of these quarterbacks. Your thoughts?
Yeah, this is a huge national story because where are all the high-profile quarterbacks in terms of stepping up and looking like first-round draft picks? When the New Orleans Saints picked Tyler Shuck, a lot of the industry chatter in the NFL was that, they didn't want Shedeur, they didn't want a big fish because they're waiting for Arch, right? They want to bring in another member of the Manning family, go back to, the 1970s, like Archie Part 2 with Arch. But now look at Arch Manning. He's not even average. He's bad, legitimately bad. Just 27 points against UTEP, 10 straight incompletions. He's a mess. And it just reinforces that, when someone hasn't done it, when someone hasn't gone through a 12-game season and already proved that he's the real deal, or at least that he's good, we need to wait and see. And so that's the case with Arch. It's a little more surprising that Nussmeier hasn't taken off. Cade Klubnik has stumbled around. This was supposed to be the year. Third year, in Garrett Riley's offense at Clemson, and it's just not happening. And then Drew Aller has looked pedestrian. Now, kind of a different deal in that Penn State's been playing cupcakes and they're not emptying the playbook and everything, but still, Aller has not looked very impressive. Julian Sayin in Ohio State, that's a work in progress, though. Sayin, unlike Aller, he hasn't gone through a full season. Aller has. That's a little bit of a difference there. Lenoris Sellers at South Carolina, a lot of buzz around him, and I know he got injured. And by the way, it seems as though he's on track to play against Missouri this weekend, but he wasn't playing well before he got hurt. So you look across the country, these quarterbacks aren't stepping up, and one of the big and pivotal elements in this season is precisely that. Which team's underachieving big name quarterback steps forward and gets it together? That team going to have the inside track to the college football playoff.
And a guy that many people thought might struggle this year because he hadn't played in a couple years, big recruit, but he hadn't played. Got a program I know you cover a lot. How about Dante Moore at Oregon? Boy, he's had a great – I know his big test is coming here in a couple weeks at Penn State, but boy, he's looked great in that Oregon offense. Everybody was nervous, him taking over Dylan Gabriel. He's played great the first 3 weeks.
Yeah, Oregon's competition has been light, but Dante Moore definitely looks the part. You can't look at Oregon's performance and Dante Moore's performance and not be impressed to a certain degree. He has stepped in. He looks comfortable. That offense is in rhythm. Yeah, absolutely. And that was a big question before the season. That was a question I had. So he's certainly passing the test so far. But yeah, Penn State coming around the bend on September 27th. That's going to answer a lot of questions for sure.
Yeah, and you could have a huge, again, if something happens at Florida where Billy Napier gets run, Lagway would probably transfer. Don't know, but you would think he'd be in the portal. He probably will be the number one guy in the portal when it comes to that. If Napier gets run out of there, is there a quarterback that we're not talking about that you really like here that this next quarter of the season here, whether it's a team like Texas Tech, team like one of the teams in the Big Ten, Dylan Raiola is going to have a great big moment Saturday night against Nebraska potentially. Give me a name that you like that maybe we're not talking enough about.
I don't think there's a name that I really like this far, because I don't want to get out in front and say this guy's the real deal based on cupcake competition. I cover USC. Jaden Maiava's looked really good through 3 games, but it's Missouri State, it's Georgia Southern, it's Purdue. I do not want to hype guys based on that. If you mentioned Dylan Raiola, if he beats Michigan and that Michigan defense and plays a solid game, then we'll give the hype. If Maiava beats Illinois in that huge late September game, then I'll give him some hype. But right now, it is just too early. We haven't had really enough showdowns. I think, you know what? If there is a quarterback who's really impressed me and has overachieved, it's the guy who left UCLA in what essentially amounted to that swap, that 1-for-1 quarterback swap with Nico Iamaleava. And by the way, because of the Deshaun Foster firing, Iamaleava can transfer right now if he wanted to. There's a 30-day portal window. So that is something to watch for sure in college football. But anyway, getting back to Joey Aguiar, the guy who left UCLA, went to Knoxville when Nico went from Knoxville to UCLA, and what essentially amounted to a swap. I wasn't expecting this. And of course, Tennessee lost, but it wasn't because of Aguiar. Tennessee scores 38 in regulation, 41 overall against a Kirby Smart defense. Right. And it just, the way Josh Heupel has been able to, do something good with Aguiar. Remember, Heupel was not certain of his QB1 in early August. His decision to elevate Aguiar to QB1 was a mid-August decision, roughly 2 weeks before the season. And you have Aguiar playing, I think, a lot better than many Tennessee fans honestly expected. So this also reaffirms Josh Heupel as a quarterback whisperer. Hendon Hooker, a little bit of Joe Milton as well. And then, Nico did not play amazing last year, but Tennessee was able to get to the college football playoff anyway. And now you have Joey Aguiar. So Josh Heupel, he knows how to coach up his quarterbacks.
And I'll give you two more names that I think are going to potentially keep doing this, because Carson Beck at Miami, Gunnar Stockton off his performance at Tennessee. I think he's finally won over the Georgia faithful with that performance in Knoxville. You got Alabama next weekend in Athens. If he beats Alabama, look, him and Carson Beck. Carson Beck got a potential showdown in Tallahassee in a couple of weeks in early October with the Seminoles. Those two Georgia guys, one an ex-Georgia guy, now the current guy, keep an eye on those two as well.
Great calls right there.
All right, let's go to a couple surprise and disappointment teams. Again, Clemson, Notre Dame. Clemson loses at Georgia Tech, late field goal. I don't think that was a huge upset, but boy, what a job Brent Key is doing building that Georgia Tech program back to respectability, back to George O'Leary, back in the early 90s when they with Bobby help me, the San Diego coach, Bobby Ross. Ross had it going. Yep. Again, Clemson, you mentioned Klubnik. They just cannot move the ball with any consistency on offense. The defense seems like they're a little overrated. They're good, but they're not as good as we thought they would be. Give me a quick and then obviously Notre Dame loses another heartbreaker. The whole Tyler Buckner, who's been the quarterback at Notre Dame, he's been the quarterback at Alabama. He's won a national championship in lacrosse at Notre Dame. He drops the snap on the extra point, which leads to the 41-40 loss against Texas A&M. Give me what's most surprised you out of those three teams being such disappointments?
Well, since I blog at about USC and at Trojans Wire, we also talk about Notre Dame all the time as one of USC's foremost rivals. And I just find this point amazing. Of course, USC fans really love this. But even if you're not a USC fan, as long as you're not a Notre Dame fan, you'll find this kind of hilarious. Notre Dame has become 2023 USC. Notre Dame has become a Lincoln Riley, Alex Grinch type of team, right? You score 40 points at home and you lose?
Right.
That's an Alex Grinch reality. And so being serious now, Marcus Freeman, did a great job last season, but of course, Al Golden, his defensive coordinator, leaves, goes to the NFL and the Cincinnati Bengals. And this is part of sustaining success as a college football coach, really as a head coach in any sport, that when your team, your program is successful, guys are going to leave for various reasons. And you need to be sure to replace either players or assistant coaches and maintain that standard, maintain quality control. And so Marcus Freeman, when Al Golden left, he hires Chris Ash as his new defensive coordinator. And it's night and day from last year. It's just a 180. And they're using a different scheme. They're doing a lot more zone, whereas Al Golden was doing man-to-man. And so these proven players, there are some young guys, there are some pieces that Notre Dame had to replace, but there's still some holdovers from last year's national runner-up team. They're confused. And you just watch that game against Texas A&M. I was busy covering USC, but I caught the fourth quarter.
Couldn't stop them. Couldn't get off the field.
They couldn't get off the field, but just dumb, undisciplined plays, like football 101. Guys rushing up the field, not staying in their lanes, not providing containment, just getting caught all out of position, a dropped interception, a really bad bailout penalty on either second or third and long, just like football 101. And so when a new coordinator comes in and he has proven defensive performers and it all crashes, that just speaks to not maintaining the standard and just not, a lot of times in sports, a mediocre coach will inherit really good talent in year one, and he'll do great. The drop off, falling off a cliff occurs in that second year when all of those inherited players left. So this is worse. Chris Ash inherited a great situation, and he's not even being the caretaker of it in year one. It's collapsing right away. So in my mind, Marcus Freeman, he needs to fire Chris Ash, and he needs to take over defensive play calling and basically get back to what Al Golden did, because not making the playoff for Notre Dame with this schedule, that's a disaster. And that is really losing all your momentum from last season.
Yep.
You kind of need to start over. So Notre Dame's total collapse on defense, because their offense is good.
Yep.
CJ Carr's doing well. You score 40 at home against a Mike Elko Texas A&M defense. Like, that's above average. That's better than expected. And yet they're 0-2.
And Freeman did come out in the media this week, said he was going to have more of an influence on the defense, which could mean taking over play calling duties kind of thing from Chris Ash. And again, they still have a schedule where I think if they win the rest of their games, and they need USC to keep winning, and then if you have to obviously need to beat USC, but they've still got there's still a pathway for Notre Dame to get in the playoff if they run the table, I think.
Yeah, but they have to. Like, one loss and it's over. Yes. One loss and it's over. Yep. Yes. They're walking a tightrope the rest of the year.
Give me a team that you think that, again, we're not talking about enough. Maybe a Texas Tech got a big matchup in Salt Lake City against Utah this weekend. A lot of people think this could be for the Big 12 title. Texas Tech spent a bunch of money in the offseason, spent a bunch of NIL money, and they've played well so far. Utah people think are going to be pretty good. Give me a thought or two about, and again, maybe Nebraska. Is Nebraska potentially a third or fourth team out of that Big 10? Illinois, Indiana, another kind of middle of the road kind of statement game in the Big 10.
Yeah, so many really compelling games. I mean, the Illinois, Indiana, Illinois is viewed as like the team that could be this year what Indiana was last year, the non-blue blood that sneaks into the playoff from the Big 10. And of course, Indiana trying to replicate what it did last season. So like, that is just a huge prove it game. Love that matchup. But let's look at that Texas Tech Utah game. One thing to consider, and this just comes from the fact that I cover UCLA in addition to USC out here in the West. Utah's 43-10 demolition of UCLA looks a little bit different now that UNLV beat UCLA, and especially New Mexico beat UCLA by 25. So that makes me think not necessarily that Utah isn't as good, but like Utah's performance against UCLA was a little bit more the product of UCLA being horrible than what Utah uniquely brought to the table. I don't know if people have been following Utah very closely, but last week, Utah-Wyoming, I believe, was a 3-0 game at halftime, or at least close to halftime, and Utah pulled away late, but Utah's offense was not very good at Wyoming. So, to me, I'm leaning toward Texas Tech in this game, but it like the Big 12 is up in the air, right? Yeah. We know this. Like Kansas State cratering the way it has under Chris Kleiman, like that makes me wonder how good Iowa State is. And Iowa State struggled with Arkansas State. Right. Arizona State's lost to Mississippi State, and Mississippi State's the team that everyone was picking to be last in the SEC. So the Big 12 is just the land of parity. It's a parity paradise. Like everything's a jump ball week to week. You don't know what's going to happen. But I would lean toward Texas Tech this week, and that really is going to begin to kind of shake things up in the Big 12. It's going to be a fascinating game. 10 a.m. local time kickoff because it's Fox Big Noon. Fox Noon
game. Yep.
We've seen Fox Big Noon go to Boulder to cover Deion Sanders. That's the 10 a.m. local time kickoff. So it's an ultimate body clock game for both teams. They're not used to it. That's going to be really interesting to see how they are in the first half. And then after halftime, does the team that started with a sleepy head get going in the second half? It's going to be really interesting.
Last question for you: is there any chance if Billy Napier gets beat soundly? Is there any chance? I mean, they have a bye week next week, and then Texas A&M after the bye week. Is there any way Napier survive? I mean, you could make an argument he could get fired at the end of this weekend if they get blown out. But if he doesn't get blown out, is there any and they go to 1-3 with Texas and Texas A&M and that brutal schedule the rest of the way, is there any way he survives, do you think, in Gainesville?
Keep in mind that UCLA fired Deshaun Foster heading into an off week. That is the time to do it in the middle of the season so that you give your interim staff more time to prepare and you're not just, swimming in controversy and negative publicity for 2 weeks. So, the next blowout, assuming there aren't, countervailing wins and impressive feats to balance things out, Billy's going to be gone.
And it's like I said, that game was winnable, very winnable in Baton Rouge. If Lagway, again, you can't blame Napier for throwing 5 interceptions, but
No,
his guy Lagway is the guy that threw
he
5
hitched
interceptions.
his wagon to him. He hitched his wagon to him.
So, all right, Matt Zemek, great work, man. You can follow Matt on X and Twitter at Trojans Wire. He covers all things USC, UCLA. Again, he's all over the college football map. Great insight for us. He's our West Coast bureau chief, relocated to the Denver area, so I'm glad the move went well for you. Mile high, you're going to get some Denver Broncos and all that good stuff. But thanks for the great insight, Matt. We'll be in touch as we move through the midpoint of the college football season.
Always great coming on your show, Jason. Much appreciated.
You appreciate you finding us on the Powers on Sports podcast. Remember, X and Twitter at JPO Sports. You can find the video content on my YouTube channel, Jason Power Sports Channel. And again, read up on Matt's great work all over the place. Trojan Wire. He'll be covering basketball season. Give me a quick update. Is Juju Watkins on pace to be back this year? What's the word there?
It's been very, very quiet, but if you talk to USC women's basketball insiders, many think she's just going to sit out the whole season and make sure she gets back to 100% for the following season. USC's continues to land like top 2 national recruits. If you ask women's basketball insiders, who's the favorite, not for the 2026 national title, but 2027, USC would be number 1 for most right now.
So if Juju, wouldn't she be eligible for the WNBA draft after this year? This would be a third year.
2027.
Oh, okay. I thought this was her third year there. Okay. All right. You sure? Third year, right? This would be her third year. And you can go to the draft after your third year, correct?
I think it's something about a birthday or
okay.
So there's a particular that it means it's 2027.
Plus, I'm sure she's getting paid a killing in NIL money to stay.
NIL's going to take care of her, yes. And like the WNBA contract situation, right? Until that gets resolved, it's a good financial deal to stay in college that extra year.
That makes sense, too. That's why he's the bureau chief with all that great insight. All right, Matt Zemek, have a great weekend. Enjoy the football, and we'll be in touch real soon, okay?
Thanks so much, Jason.
All right, we'll see you next time on the Powers on Sports podcast. Appreciate you finding us. Have a great weekend of football, and take care of yourself. Be nice to people, and don't watch the news for a couple days, man. It's pretty rough out there. No more Jimmy Kimmel for a while, apparently. So, all right, we'll see you next time on the Powers on Sports podcast.